Hi there! Today we're going to make this wire-wrapped heart pendant. So let's get wrapping. For this project we need 2mm diameter copper wire, which is 14 gauge, 1mm diameter copper wire, which is 18 gauge, and 0.4mm diameter copper wire, which is 26 gauge. And the tools we need are wire cutters, round nose or bell making pliers, chain or flat nose pliers, a hammer and block, and a file. To make the flat element, we're starting with 5 cm or 2 inches of the 2mm or 14 gauge wire, and I've fully annealed this so it's nice and soft. And we need to bend quite a tight curve in one of the ends. Then we'll follow that curve around to make a nice smooth shape. And bend it slightly at the other end. Now we want to hammer this flat. And we're going to start with that bottom end because we want it to splay out and be slightly wider than the rest. And then we can continue hammering up the piece. And we want the rest of the piece to be about the same width. Now the rest of the shaping we're going to do with a file. So we'll start at that bottom end again and just take off any burrs and just get it to the shape that we like. And then for the top bit of this swirl, we want to file the end into a point. So we're just taking off that outer edge. We can make sure it's nice and smooth as we go. And just keep filing until we've got the shape that we want. At this point we can polish out any marks from the hammering. And just polish it up to a stage that we want. We can do more polishing later if we wish. And we're ready to start weaving the frame. To create the rest of the frame, we're going to use 30 cm or 12 inches of the 1mm 18 gauge wire. We just want to find roughly where the centre is. And then bend the wire in half. We want to make it so those two halves are running parallel to each other, but have got enough of a gap between them to fit that flat element. We're just going to curve those wires at that bend slightly. And it's going to fit into place about here. For the weaving, we're using the 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire, and I've got about 1.5 meters or 5 feet here. And we're going to wrap that 3 times around the front frame wire. We can then fit that flat element in place and push those wraps up to that flat element. We're then going to wrap over both of those frame wires twice. And then wrap 7 times on that front frame wire, which is the one we started on. At this point we can trim that starting end of the weaving wire and then continue that 2-7 weave. And as we go, we're going to twist these frame wires around and bend them into the left-hand side of the heart shape. So we'll just continue weaving and bending into the shape we want. And I'm going to make this a whimsy heart shape, which isn't symmetrical on both sides. By the time we get to the top of that weaving, we want the totally coiled wire to be on the inside of that curve. We want to finish with 2 wraps over both wires, and then 1 over the right handmost wire, just to hold everything in place. And that's our left-hand side done. Now we need to put the cleft into the top of the heart, and it might be easier to take that flat element out for this. So taking the innermost wire of those frame wires, we just want to bend it forwards and over so it's lying on top of itself. We can then take the other wire, and we're just going to bend this slightly further down than that first one, but do exactly the same thing. And bend it forwards on top of itself, and just make sure the front and the back are quite close together. We can then put that flat element back and work out where that's going to sit. So we can just start shaping the wire that's closest to it. And this is the one we're going to weave onto it. And just make sure that's a shape that we like. Then we can take the weaving wire through and start wrapping on the front of the wire that it came from. We're just going to wrap around that frame wire up to the point where the flat element will meet it. And then we'll take the weaving wire through the centre of the heart and wrap both that frame wire and the flat element twice. We'll then wrap just the frame wire 7 times as we did before. So it's the same weave as we were doing on the left-hand side, but using that flat element instead of one of the frame wires. And we're going to continue this 2-7 weave around the top curve of the heart. Now I've got 5 of those double wraps on, so that seems like a nice place to stop. So we can just finish by wrapping that frame wire 7 times again. And then we're going to start bringing that frame wire across to the inside of the heart. We just want to make it a nice smooth curve. Then we can think about this other wire. And this is going to be where the pendant hangs from. So we need to leave a bit of space between it and the woven section. And just make a nice curve round. And then take it over the weave so it's sitting inside of that other wire. Then we can continue the weave on those 2 frame wires. So we'll wrap both of them twice and then move to the innermost wire and wrap that 7 times. And we'll continue this weave over the front of the flat element. Now before we start attaching this onto the flat element again, it's worth thinking about what we're going to do with those ends. And I think if I bend them round like that, that's creating a design I quite like. So let's just trim off some of the excess. If I take that innermost wire to sit under the piece at the end, yeah, I quite like how that looks. We'll trim off the rest of the excess. And then just to help the design and help the weave stay in place, I think we should hammer those ends So we just need to ease those wires back out of the design to give us a bit of space. And carefully hammer the ends. Then just file off any burrs and gently reposition them. Now we've got 3 wires to weave together, so we can switch to the leaf weave. So we've got 5 wraps on that innermost wire. Then we'll wrap the 2 frame wires just once this time. Take that weaving wire through between them. And wrap the outermost frame wire and the flat element twice. Then take that weaving wire between those and wrap the 2 frame wires once. We'll then wrap just that innermost wire 5 times. Now this weaving can be a little bit fiddly at this stage, but just take your time. Then once we've got those 5 wraps on the innermost wire, we'll wrap both frame wires once. Take the weaving wire through between them. Wrap the outermost frame wire and that flat element twice. Take the weaving wire through between them. And wrap the 2 frame wires once. Then wrap 5 times on that innermost wire again. And we'll just repeat this one more time, so we've got 3 of those leaf wraps on the frame. Then we're just going to continue wrapping that innermost wire right the way down to the bottom. And take the weaving wire through between the 2 frame wires where we started. This will just attach that wire to the frame at the bottom there. Take the weaving wire through again. And then we haven't got much room left on the wire that we've just been wrapping. So we can take another wrap through that left-hand frame where we started. Make sure everything's nice and tight. And trim that weaving wire. And we can leave this bright copper or oxidise it. And our pendant's finished. If you enjoyed this video, why not head to this playlist for more heart-shaped projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.